Hello, and welcome to another episode of Adamo Baseball, where I'm your host, Adamo. And in this episode, I'm going to be breaking down the 1909 World Series. Of course, because last week I did 1908, so it only stands to reason. So, for the first time since 1903, we have a World Series that's gone to 7 games. Difference between this and 1903 is that in 1903 it was best of 9 series, first team to win 5 wins. All 1909 it was best of 7, and it had been a best of 7 for a while. This was the first World Series that came down to the last game, the first truly winner-take-all game in a World Series, that being what is now referred to as the iconic Game 7. And while not all the games were close, some of them were, and the series itself felt close. And it truly feels like, at least going into Game 7, that either team truly had a chance. That it wasn't just, it's just a shutout here, it's a shutout there, back and forth, whatever. No, this series between the Pittsburgh Pirates, who was also a consistent feature from 1903, and the Detroit Tigers, yes, they're playing in their 3rd World Series straight, making them the 2nd team in history to play in 3 straight World Series. It felt like either team could win the series, and up to that point, it was the first series where neither team had a 2-game win streak. It really did go back and forth between one, and then the other, then the other, then the other, until Game 7, where the winner took all. So, just want to throw a couple of Hall of Famers out there first, because it's a little different this time. It is the first without Hall of Fame umpire Hank O'Day, at least up to that point, or at very least that was umpiring in this series. This time it was a consistent Bill Clem from the previous World Series, and a new one, Billy Evans. For the Tigers, it was the same 3 Hall of Famers: Sam Crawford, Ty Cobb, and the manager, Huey Jenkins. So, probably been hearing those names quite a bit up to this point. Those are the same 3 guys. For the Pirates, I didn't actually do that deep dive for the Pirates in 1903 because I was still trying to work on it up to that point. Well, for the Pittsburgh Pirates, you ought to recognize at least one of these names, though you could recognize the other 2. I won't say you should or shouldn't, but it's possible. Vic Willis, I've never heard of him prior to doing this research. Player manager Frank Clark, and of course, the one that most people, not necessarily everybody, but most people should identify as one of the iconic Pittsburgh Pirates, Honus Wagner. He played in his first World Series in 1903, didn't have that great a series. Then in 1909, let me make sure I get his stats right, just to see if he really did play as well as one would expect. He was 8 for 24 at the plate. He scored 4 runs, had 2 doubles and a triple, knocked in 6 runs, had 4 walks, only struck out twice, stole base 6 times. They didn't keep the stat for caught stealing, committed 3 errors. Then during the regular season, he had 100 runs batted in, 168 hits, 92 runs, 5 home runs, which for back then was a lot, and he led the team in 137 games, had a batting average of .339, and an on-base plus slugging percentage of .909. What back then would amount to MVP numbers today. Or at least what we would think of as an MVP for that time. Yeah, he was that guy. Oh, he was second on the team in home runs, behind Tommy Leach, who had 6. Home runs back then, not a common occurrence. I mentioned player manager Fred Clark. He had 2 home runs for the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. Those were the 2 home runs for the Pittsburgh Pirates in the World Series. As if it's not obvious yet, home runs really weren't that big. They happened, but especially in the World Series, you weren't usually trying to put it out of the park. You were more just trying to put it into play, which is why there were a lot more triples back then. Though Honus Wagner had the only triple for the Pirates. From the Tigers' perspective, there were also 2 home runs and no triples, which was rare because back then players tried to get those. One of the home runs was Hall of Famer Sam Crawford, and the other one was Davy Jones. I don't know if he put it in his locker. As far as pitching is concerned, this is a little more interesting. So, I definitely talked about this guy a lot for the 1903 World Series, Deacon Phillippe. He pitched 5 complete games in 13 days. Imagine a pitcher trying to do that today. That ain't happening. Back then, however, different story. He didn't pitch bad, but he also didn't pitch that much. He only threw 6 innings. For the Detroit Tigers pitching, also, different story. Bill Donovan was their main pitcher, who had been their main pitcher up to that point. George Mullin threw 3 complete games for the Detroit Tigers. Those were their only 2 starters. And back then, you were expected to throw the whole game. George Mullin pitched in 4, started 3. The 3 games that he started, he threw the whole games. He threw them all the way through. He actually had 5 innings of relief in the 1 game that he didn't start. Then Bill Donovan started 2 games, completed 1 of them. He only threw 3 innings in the other. Whereas the other pitcher, they did have a 3rd starter, Ed Summers. He started 2 games too, though he didn't pitch nearly as much. But you usually don't complete it when your ERA is 8.59. And the rest of the relief pitchers, one was good. Ed Willett threw 7 2/3 and gave up nothing. Ralph Works, on the other hand, had an ERA of 9. But by a strange twist of fate, both pitching staffs, the whole thing, not just the starters, but the starters and the relievers for both teams had a 3.10 ERA. The exact same ERA for both teams, not just one or the other. It was identical. And I'm just going to do a quick upstairs math to try to figure out how many runs were scored by each team. So we got 8, 14, 19, 23, 28. So the Tigers scored 28 runs total for the series. In 7 games, it's an average of 4 runs per game. It's about what you want for the Pittsburgh Pirates. They scored 32 total for the series, which is a little over 4.5 per game for the series. Pretty good, which is... So they had the same ERAs. It means that the Pirates scored more on errors than the Tigers did. Oh, I miscalculated. The Pirates scored 34. I suppose if I would have looked in the right place, I would have known that. So that I can quit beating around the bush, I suppose I ought to just tell you who won it. Nah. I also mentioned last week that the series games back then were a lot quicker than they are today. Well, that's what happens when you don't have a bunch of commercials playing all the time. In the first 5 games of the World Series, not one of them lasted 2 hours. Game 6 lasted exactly 2 hours, and Game 7 was 2 hours and 10 minutes. And it was a blowout win, too. So, Game 7 wasn't exactly dramatic in any sense of the word. However, the series itself did go to 7, which was very different from what had been done up to that point. And the person that ended up coming out of nowhere and just blowing the doors off everybody was starting pitcher Babe Adams, who went 3-0 for the Pittsburgh Pirates. The Pittsburgh Pirates, returning to the World Series for the first time since 1903, got their first World Series win in 1909. As in, win for the whole series. The Tigers did push the Pirates to a Game 7, but the Pirates just got blown out, or the Tigers just got blown out by the Pirates in Game 7, 8-0. Babe Donovan, apparently he was a rookie pitcher that year and ended up winning 3 games, 3 of the 4 wins for the Pittsburgh Pirates. The other one was Nick Maddox. Bill Donovan took the loss, and the Tigers lost their 3rd straight World Series. The scores for the series were 4-1, 7-2, 8-6, 5-0, 8-4, 5-4, 8-0. To put that in perspective, the Pirates won by 3 in Game 1 at home. Then they lost 7-2 at home in Game 2. So baseball actually chose to use a different format for the who hosts and who goes on the road. It's actually kind of an interesting scenario. So the Pirates hosted the first 2. The Tigers hosted games 3 and 4, where the Pirates won game 3, 8-6, and then the Tigers won game 4, 5-0. Game 5, the series went back to Pittsburgh, where the Pirates won 8-4, but then the last 2 games were played in Detroit, where the Tigers won 5-4 in Game 6, and then the Pirates won in Game 7, 8-0. So it looks like they were still experimenting with their home and away philosophy at the time. I don't know that they really knew where they wanted to host the games yet. So there's still a lot of that going on. But this was the first World Series, regardless of what happened, either the Pirates or the Tigers were going to get their first championship. That's just the way it was. the first championship was going to one of those cities. For the record, it wasn't the last. Just want to throw a few last stats out there just to put it into perspective for this series. So the total attendance was 145,295. The average attendance was 20,756. Living in a worldwide pandemic, 20,000 in some stadiums is about all they'll let in. There are times when they'll let in more, but there's also a lot of times that they let in less. However, that is about the amount of fans that are in the stands in each individual stadium. That was the World Series. And this last stat, I really just want to throw at you, just to show how times have changed in the last 112 years. The winning players' share, as in per person, $1,825. The losing team's players' share, as in per person, I only know that because of how they're getting the apostrophe for the possession on the word players, $1,275. They do have a source on here, World Series gate receipts and players' shares by Baseball Almanac. And that was retrieved June 14th, 2009. So I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. I actually am sourcing this so that there's a viable source for that. A player making $1,825 in 1909, the average cost of a house at that time was about $4,000. They could put a down payment on a house with their winnings. Just an average house, we're talking like 2-bed, 2-bath, or 2-bed, 1-bath if it had plumbing. But they wouldn't be able to buy it just outright. For the losing player, they can still put a down payment down. Maybe not necessarily on one as nice. And it was good enough more to be able to get them through the winter, because back then you could only work certain times of the year. It's not that it was impossible so much as baseball wasn't their primary job. Baseball was what you wanted to do because you loved the game. Back then, they played it for the love of the game. Today, you're looking at $5 million bonuses for getting a win in a World Series. Clayton Kershaw made more than the Tampa Bay Rays' entire roster. It really does change just how you really look at the game today. I mean, I love the game. I do. If I didn't love the game, I wouldn't be doing this series. But I just really want to make it clear just how much it really was because they loved playing back then, and how hard it really was to get into the game, and just how different it was. I suppose I ought to go ahead and mention this last stat. The Pittsburgh Pirates set a franchise record that year with 110 wins for the season, and they only won the pennant by 6.5 games, meaning that when they won the pennant, the team that finished second had at least 103, if not 104. And then the Detroit Tigers won the American League pennant with 98. The Pirates' winning record was 724, which is second highest all time, only behind the 1906 Chicago Cubs. That was a better winning percentage than the 2001 Mariners, which, for a lot of fans, we still remember the 2001 Mariners. I do. I was only 10 at the time, or 11 at the time. Yes, I dated myself. I don't care. But that really was just something to really notice, you know. I think I ought to go ahead and just leave it there. If there's something else you felt like I should have mentioned or something I should have done differently, go ahead and leave a comment down in the comments below. Or if you're listening to my podcast, come on over to my YouTube channel and leave a comment. Or you can let me know on Twitter, AdamOBaseball, or at Adamo_baseball1. With that being said, thanks for listening and watching. Cheers until next time.